so I'll just pull it in my side. There's something at this point. Anything that exciting for us tonight?
Recording in progress.
Yeah. All right. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the September 20th meeting of the Trinidad Planning Commission. We'll begin tonight with the roll call. Commissioner Slay will be joining us a few minutes late tonight, he said.
Commissioner Cole.
Present.
Commissioner Hakeman.
Present.
Commissioner Johnson.
Here.
Commissioner Hopkins.
Here. All right. Under approval of minutes, we have a couple on here. The July 12th, which did not, as far as I could find, get posted to the city website. So I'm thinking we probably want to defer that to next month. So there's a chance for the public to comment should they want to. But that leaves us the August 16th minutes. And then I also had a question about the April minutes. We did not have a quorum to move on those last meetings. So can we move on those now or because they weren't agendized? Okay.
I was so focused on, I got to get the July 12th minutes on there.
All right.
I missed the April. And it looks like you can't vote on either of them without Chris.
But I believe August, right?
I thought I just looked.
No, we will need to wait. You're right. It was just Richard, Chris, and myself. So perhaps we can come back to that later in the evening or run it for next month.
Either way.
Either way. All right, we'll table that one for now. Somebody help me remember to come back to that, please, because I've already forgotten. Approval of tonight's agenda. Anybody have any changes they would like to see to tonight's agenda?
Move to approve.
All right. So now moving on to items from the floor. Items not appearing on the agenda. Welcome to comment now. Anybody from the public? Person or online? I don't believe so. All right, no items from the floor. That moves us on to our regular agenda items, beginning with item number 1. Trevor.
All right, so this is your monthly update on the Axel Lindgren and Parker Creek Trail closures. As you know, you approved temporary closure, 6-month closures to protect sensitive resources and do some erosion control down on the beach. And the base of Parker Creek Trail was repaired in May and reopened. Axel Lindgren Trail remains closed pending some repairs to the base of the trail and potential rerouting. The GHG report that they were working on for rerouting the trail has been completed and provided to the Ancestral Society. They have not yet provided a copy to the city. They were going to meet as a board first for sending that out. And then the fencing on the beach needs to be removed before the end of the month. there's some storms coming, so should sooner. I know Eli told Public Works to go ahead and do that, so I imagine it's done.
I don't know. It's done. It was begun today.
Yeah. Okay. So it started today. Great. And then just as on a related note, some of you may remember way back when to the temporary closure of the Van Wyck Trail. So that has been slumping for some time, and so the city did look for some grant funding to do some repairs, and got some grant funding, but it was a large repair with a big retaining wall and a bigger trail. And so that was, there were a number of issues with that. And so the city ended up not moving forward with that repair. And the Planning Commission authorized a 6-month closure of the trail to look at repair options. Basically, why we closed it was the insurance company said that it's not insurable. And the reason Van Wyck is different than some of the other trails is because of the failing little retaining wall that was there, and that's failing, and there's boards sticking out, nails, and so when there are some limits on liability for cities for trails, but in a case where there's improvements failing like that, it's hard to defend. So the insurance company was the one who sort of precipitated the closure. Between COVID and other things, we didn't make a lot of progress on looking for options, kind of got dropped by the wayside a little bit. It had been appealed. Trail technically should have remained open during the appeal. And the Coastal Commission heard it at their September meeting. They found no substantial issue, but only because it was a 6-month closure, and they made it very clear that we want that trail reopened. Also 6 months. So we already met the Coastal Commission staff. We have a meeting with the management team yesterday, and although that wasn't particularly on the agenda, we did it. So it's super complicated. It's a super complicated issue, but we're looking at options. Be back before you and something. So that's my report, and take
a question. What happens at the end of the 6 months and the trail isn't opened?
good question.
Which trail are you referring to?
I'm sorry, Van Wyck.
Good question. I'm
Ask it for both.
yeah. I'm not sure at this point. There would be an option to extend that, or to bring that to the Planning Commission for an extension. I'm sure it would be appealed.
Hasn't the trail already been closed for well over 6 months though?
It's been closed for like 4 years. Yeah. So technically the appeal and the Coastal Commission taking the appeal stayed the city's action. So it should have been reopened, but because we were trying to figure out, again, we have the complications of the insurance, and the city, it's not an insurance company, it's an insurance co-op of cities. So all the cities pay into that. And so if Trinidad gets sued, all the 50 other cities have to support that. And then, but the Yurok tribe and the TAS want the trail closed. So, and then it's moving, obviously it's moving. So a lot of complicated issues. I imagine we're not going to have it fixed in 6 months. So we'll have to figure out what the next steps are. Really,
I think I've heard number of times here by people in the community and confirming that insurance, that the city does, there's trails everywhere, that the city doesn't have liability.
Oh, they do. And defending liability, even so someone can sue whether you have liability or not, and then you have to defend it. So for example, there was recently, they cited a case where recently they had to pay $500,000 to defend a liability. They won, but it still comes out. And because of the failing retaining law, that the court, there's been some recent court decisions that say if there are improvements like that that have failed, then you do them. So it's nuanced.
And so the 6 months begins tolling now.
Starting with the Coastal Commission decision, yeah.
When does the 6 month period on the Axel Lincoln Trail expire?
I forget the exact date, but like mid-November, I think it was. Anybody remember? Imagine the steps were taken out, right?
Yeah, the cable log steps are gone and there's the jute matting down at the base.
Yeah, so I imagine we're gonna have to ask for an extension. Eli really wants to have it open by next Memorial Day, but you have to figure out,
When
some new steps or something.
do we know the schedule for the TAS board for their next meeting when they're going to see this? I guess next time you meet with them, just from my perspective, communicate to them we're hopeful to see a copy of this
Yes,
document that
Eli has
covers
requested a couple of times.
city property,
And I mean, it's a grant, it's a private, it's a private grant. Sometimes grant deliverables are public, so I don't know if we could get it that way. It's a private grant to a private entity, so I don't.
Who's the grant with?
Seventh
generation.
Yeah.
I doubt seriously that we could get a copy.
Yeah.
And the irony is, there's been a big fight to keep that trail open long ago when that lighthouse was built. And so everybody wants this trail to be open. I think they're trying to do it in a good way.
Yeah.
And but just to let you know that there was a huge fight because at that time it was I heard it was going to be closed at one time, and so they kept it open, and it's going to be open some. I would assume.
Right. On the agenda item, the update on the trail. Anything else from the commission? Did you have anything specific to that one?
Just getting a copy of the report.
We don't have one yet. We're asking for one. Okay. Any public comment on item? Anybody online raising their hand in the room rushing to the microphone? All right, we'll bring it back to the commission. Anything else? Nothing else required from us, right, Trevor? On that one?
Nope.
Okay.
No action.
All right, agenda item number 2.
Let's see. So this one is an extension request for the Rancheria's Interpretive Center. So this is that was approved in August 2021. The Rancheria extension requested an extension prior to the expiration of that approval. Basically, Planning Commission included a condition of approval for a 2-year approval. There's been a number of delays, one of which was figuring out the lot line adjustment and how to deal with the Galindo Street right of way, and maybe that was going to be any sense. So you guys approved that lot line adjustment earlier this year. I believe the Rancheria submitted their CDP application today for that. So they've been working with the Coastal Commission on getting all that material together. So I believe that there is good cause for the delays. They're also, Braintree is working on some other projects that are cool. And the conditions haven't substantially changed, so staff recommendation is to go ahead and extend the approval.
Okay, thanks, Trevor. Any questions from the commission for Trevor?
Just to clarify, the only thing in front of us tonight is the extension itself. There's no other aspects of the original project that we.
There's a couple of representatives from the Rancheria. So you could certainly ask questions. An amendment to the project would require a different action and could affect their CDP submittals.
With that, it looks like the Rancheria might be present. I don't know if they had any input, anything they wanted to offer tonight. The applicant. Look like it.
Good afternoon or good evening. This is Leslie Sanders. I'm the Transportation and Land Use Director for the Rancheria. And the Interpretive Center is one of the projects that I am overseeing. We also have James Brown, who is a tribal council representative here. He's also on Zoom if you have any questions for him. But the Rancheria, we have been working diligently on ensuring that all of the conditions to the lot line adjustment as well as this permit are carried out carefully. As Trevor mentioned, the CDP permit did get submitted today. It is actually they allowed us to combine the lot line adjustment as well as the construction of the project. We did submit all the documentation to the title company in June following the notice to proceed on the lot line adjustment with the stipulations that we would bring all the documentation back to the Planning Commission. On Wednesday, we just received the preliminary title reports from the title company. And we know this is a very, very complex project. The line adjustment itself is very complex. So we are working diligently. We have not let up on this, and that's why we would ask for the extension.
All right. Thank you very much, Leslie. Any questions from the commissioners for the applicant? Yeah.
Leslie, thanks for the information. I asked this question because we've seen recent projects modified significantly due to skyrocketing costs of construction. So I'm asking, since this was approved quite a while ago, whether the increased cost of construction materials has in any way affected the design or any other aspects of this project, or whether it's just going to go forward as it's always been planned.
So obviously, yes, the increased costs are affecting the project or affecting the Rancheria. However, with that said, we are not changing any of the design. We are not changing any of that. In fact, we did put the project out to bid just to try and get an estimate. And yes, costs have come in. Probably, I want to say at least 500,000 that would have been if we would have been able to move forward with this project 2 years ago. But we had COVID. We have all the complexities of the project. We are well aware that are the consequences of them. So no, we have not modified the project. We are not changing the design. All of the documents that went to the Coastal Commission were the same documents that we had submitted previously. We did have to update the building codes and some of that, but the actual design has not been changed or modified.
Right. Thank you for the information. Sorry to hear about the strain on resources, but I appreciate it.
It was quite a shock, but it is something that we will figure it out.
Right. Any other commissioner questions for the applicant? All right, this time I'll open it up to public comment if there's any members of the public with questions about this project. Seeing and hearing none, I'll bring it back to the commission. Anybody else have any questions or comments or thoughts? It's entertaining a motion.
Based on the information submitted in the application, included in the staff report and public testimony, I move to adopt the information and findings in the staff report and approve the design review and grading permit for the Trinidad Rancheria Interpretive Center building as submitted and conditioned therein.
Okay. Just a technical question. I think it might have been the 2021, the August.
Did I read the wrong one?
Yeah, the August one instead of the.
Thank you.
I didn't get the extension on it.
Let me modify my motion then, based on the fact that conditions have not substantially changed and the fact that the rancheria is continuing to actively pursue all the necessary permits and funding. I move to extend the approval for a grading permit and design review for the Trinidad Rancheria Interpretive Center building for the 2 years as conditioned in the original approval. Thank you very much.
I second.
All right, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. All right, thank you, Leslie. Thank you, James.
Thank you very much.
Oh, I do just ask, keep us appraised of the, if you encounter any more delays, kind of like with the storm thing that we extended in October, I think it was, just if there's anything we can do to help you guys out, let us know.
Perfect. And as soon as we get more information on the lot line adjustment, we will be back to provide you additional information on that.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, this is James. How's it going, everybody? On tribal council there at Trinidad Rancheria. I just would like to thank you for your consideration today. And again, we always want to stay in good contact and communication with our neighbors and be good stewards towards our neighbors. So, again, moving forward, if anybody has any other questions, feel free to reach out. I feel like there's an open door for us as neighbors to have that communication. So thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you. All right, moving on to agenda item number 3.
All right, so this is a fairly small project consisting of a small addition to a deck and some stairs and a new viewing platform off the existing decks. This is another project you saw a couple of years ago where there was a large remodel. A little bit of changes to the footprint actually reduced the size of the footprint, although it increased the square footage of the house and added some additional decking. And then the stairs and the platform were constructed, I assume as part of that, but that wasn't part of the 2021 approval. So they were informed that permits would be required, and so this is an after the fact coastal development permit for that because of the size of the deck, some being in a unstable area and a couple other things. Requires a coastal development permit and design review. It's changing the external profile of the structure. Let's see. It's not changing the building itself though, so does not affect height, square footage, things like that. The property where the project is located is suburban residential. Property does have some special environment zoning in the narrow strip that leads down to the coast. The project meets all the required setbacks. It's got a 13.5-foot setback from the rear's west property line, and that is allowable by the zoning ordinance. Minimal grading was required. The supports for the pilings were hand dug. It's got minimal potential to block views to the location. Because the property has SE zoning, I provided the regulations for the SE zoning. Most of them do not apply to this project because it's not affecting vegetation. It's not near a bluff, stream, but it is in an area that's or designated as being questionably stable. So I did ask for a geologist to take a look. There was a geologic engineering assessment that was completed for the project. It is fairly brief, but there was a more detailed one completed for the previous project. Found one of the questions we had for that was this on a bluff? It's on a face, which it's not. It's not in an area that's subject to a lot of erosion. Found that the deck was well built and is not going to contribute to any instability. However, we are aware that it is an exposed rock face with a driveway below it, a parking area, and a few years ago, a big chunk broke off, crushed. So I did include a couple of conditions related to holding the city harmless and indemnifying the city against any damages that might occur that could be attributed to the deck. And that should it become unstable or compromised from rock falls, that it would have to be. So those are added conditions on the project. Not affecting the septic system or landscaping. Design review findings are written in a manner to allow approval, but as usual, you should consider those findings and whether they need to be reworded if the public presents additional information. For example, staff recommendation at this point is for approval with the conditions. Oh, and just to note, condition 6 requires that they submit an application to transfer the OWTS permit, and that has been submitted since the staff approach. Happy to answer any questions.
All right, open up to the commissioners.
Yeah, I had a question. In here, for you, Trevor, you stated the deck's over 30 inches high, greater than 500 square feet, visible from the street, are not exempt. But is this deck over 30 inches high or any of those things? I mean, you can see it from Edwards Edwards Street.
Yeah, I mean, it changes. There's a lot of deck already.
Right.
So when you add it to the existing deck and the existing project, and with the footings in the unstable area and on the rock face, and it is visible from the street, technically.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly how high it is. By itself, it's not 500 square feet, but those are the exemptions for coastal development permits. And we generally, for example, there's an exemption for a 500 square foot accessory structure less than 15 feet height, but we only allow that once. Like you don't get them multiple ones of those. So since the decking is already 500 square feet, it requires it.
Even though the decking is presumably part of some other.
Yes, again, I think it's an additive, because that's how we've interpreted regulations first. Good question.
Probably quite visible.
And that's
I mean, it's pretty far. Yeah.
vegetated. Can you?
I mean, I did pull it up on Google Earth, the parcel, just looking at it, and it I think what I'm seeing is just a little, almost like sun deck kind of eating platform
Yeah.
in this small clearing in the trees here.
I mean,
At least from the overhead view, I don't know what it is from ground level.
it's most visible from Old Mill Beach. That's where I noticed it.
The platform.
It's pretty well from there. But in town, from the head, it's like so far away that you don't notice it unless you're like looking for it.
Questions?
Just for clarification, under site characteristics, the second sentence there in that paragraph said the site borders the city limits and the Trinidad Rancheria to the east. This just to clarify, this parcel is within the city limits.
It is so, but that eastern property line is the city limits.
Certain property is the city limits. The eastern, yes, okay,
Yeah.
yes, of course,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Because 170 is the last
Is the
parcel
last parcel.
before the that's within the city limits on that side of scenic, right? And not that it matters, but it is relatively easy to see that platform from scenic, which of course is not necessarily a specific view, but they probably. So at this point, I went back and looked at the original, well, I shouldn't say the original, the last time that this project came before us. And there were at that point, looked like there were still some open issues with unpermitted development. And I don't know, did we sweep all of that into the last time we did this?
I believe so, because there was, I think, some decks that had been constructed. The remodeling had started without construction, and there was a sunroom or a woodshed that we didn't have permits for. That was removed as part of that project. So yes, I believe we took care of it.
So with that in mind, then everything that is in that original report should have a permit associated with it.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
I went back and reviewed the tape from this meeting, and you made a comment, Trevor, that a lot of the previous permits were filed by year, not by property, so our records weren't as a city.
Well, and some of it's in a moldy storage unit.
Right.
Shed too.
So your point, though, I think, was that I wanted to just reiterate was that because we don't know doesn't mean that there wasn't one. There could have been.
There could have, yes. I think that's what I was trying to say is the woodshed, we didn't have a file for it. That doesn't mean it didn't get a permit, but we wrapped it into that approval. And it was removed.
Yeah, there's been improvements that have been made since 1992. And so I just want to make sure that we've covered everything.
As far as I know.
Okay, all right.
There's questions for Trevor at this point. I believe we have For the applicant here, anything you'd like to add, or can we ask you some questions? If you would you mind setting the microphone, just otherwise the audio won't get captured. Thank you.
On the WTS permit, the owners just filed that, but the inspection will be done by us.
Okay.
Just for the record, your name, sir?
Andrew?
Oh, okay. Saw your name on that.
And you're the owner's agent, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. I guess I have a question, I guess, for either you or Trevor. When I was going back and looking at the drawings here that were submitted, C 1.1 of this packet versus the old packet, and this is minor, but it appears that there's I guess maybe it's not minor. If you look at the original one, there's a large projection of the deck that was filled in, that was not shown on the original application, that is on this one, and it's showing as existing grayed out deck on what you submitted tonight. And I was just curious if you could speak to that difference.
Yeah. I'll explain the filled in that. Shown on.
So it looks like it projects right off the corner of the building there. It looked to be like kind of almost a return in, and now that was on the original document back from 2021, I think, that we got for that original after the fact permit. On this one now, that's been squared off. And then in addition to that, there's the stairwell down and then coming across. And so it looks like a big section of deck was added somewhere that's not captured in either one. It's just like it's represented here. It's absolutely, please, yeah. So this is the document from last time. I'm referring to that section right there between those 2 points. And right here, it looks like it's been filled in and is being represented as existing, but it was not part of the proposed decking in the project that we saw before. So I understand where that section right there was.
So this is, that's not very accurate. That's always been, you can walk through here. So this is probably.
So those two corners that was squared off before?
Yes.
This is, so the, okay.
And so this is the original drawing, right? So the part that was added on in the last one was this portion right here.
Section there, right?
But this should have been gray coming out.
So that piece there was there, okay.
Yes.
And then
because you've always been able to walk
around the corner of the building.
Yeah.
Okay,
Mhm.
that makes sense. And then, okay, that was the biggest thing that jumped out to me on that
That's a good, very observant. Yes.
little detail.
Well, if anyone needed to inspect that, you could see, you would be able to look underneath and see that.
No, that makes sense that you'd have the ability to
To be able to walk to the.
walk around, although that new deck wasn't there before, that was added in, right?
Right.
So there was nowhere to walk around to before.
Just stairs going down.
Gotcha, okay. Any other questions for the applicant? Yeah, Tom.
So you're the owner's representative. Could you help us understand why a permit wasn't pulled, and double the cost doesn't stop somebody doing something? What would get the owner's attention to pull a permit next time instead of doing it and then getting it after? Do you have any input?
Yeah, I have a couple of comments on that. First of all, and the first permit. On the second one, in their defense, it started out as just wanting to build a little 10 by pad down there that it could go down and have breakfast or whatever, and with a view. You know, that wouldn't have required it. So that was where it started. And then they had grandchildren, so then they were worried about it's protected on that property. They have everything fenced so the grandchildren can't get to it. Then they started, and they wanted handrails around it, and then stairs to go down to it to be safe to get down there. And then of course you had to have, and so they poor choice. Yeah. think, yeah, another or as far as the question of what would it take to deter them, I don't know. I think it was a bad judge call on this deal, and you know, double the penalty here, it hurts, but you know, I think the kind of people that they are, if they had to tear it out, they'd tear it out. I think they were willing to get that. Saw how beautiful it was down there on that platform. They just wanted to get it done. They're in their 70s. They probably didn't want to go through the 4 years it takes to get permit. So they just, you know, and then protect the cost. So
Thank you. I was just curious, we had to, when I had to ask ourselves what would be deterrent, and we were hoping that double would be a deterrent, but triple would be better deterrent. I mean, for the city, they make money.
I think depending on the size of the project, right? But yeah, on quadruple would be.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at the price of these homes around here,
Exactly.
I don't think double the penalty is. This is just me speaking that. But if you look at what they pay, double the penalty is probably not enough.
Thank you.
Questions for the applicant?
I've got a question that maybe not, sorry, is it? Rightfully so, I suppose most of the attention is focused on the stairs and that view platform. Can you speak a little bit about that proposed access walkway and guardrail and what it provides access to? Just to give us a better sense of why it's there.
You're talking about the little strip on the end down there, yeah.
Yeah.
So that one there was mostly you're out in the.
Anton, can you do anything about the feedback we're getting?
They can't hear it online. So
You want me to put the mic away a little bit?
I can turn you up so that you can hear you.
Oh, am I not loud enough?
No, just speak directly.
Sure. Okay, is that better? Testing. 1, 2.
Yeah, the feedback is getting.
I hope you can hear me now. So it's just right now there's only one there was only one exit out of that backyard. And so it just gave them an additional it's quite a long way. The south side of the property to the front yard, and so if there was any but you know, if there was an emergency exit out, they just out of there to the driveway.
And so is it accurate that that guardrail is fixed then, or is it a gates?
Right now it's fixed, but it would at some. Yes.
Other questions? All right, we'll open it up to any public comment if there is any, real quick. No. Anybody else in the room? Obviously, anybody online? Now's your chance. Not seeing any hands raised. We'll bring it back to the commissioners. Any other discussion? I just had a question, Trevor, and it's probably in the packet and I missed it, but neighbors were noticed within 100 feet. Okay.
One more thing.
Yeah, sure.
Just as far as being able to view it from scenic, we were sensitive to that, so we put in a planter box and planted some. That's going we plan on putting some other plants in that planter box that will grow up to help hide it from. It's like somebody mentioned already, you gotta really be watching if you like by it. We are aware of the fact that you can see it, so that's my plans.
The commissioners.
I just wanted to add maybe in response to that we recently discussed the types of plants that should be installed in close proximity to the special environmental zone. And so if it's time to replace those plants, I'd encourage doing it. Teachings. Effect the vegetation.
And it says
Yeah, most of the landscapers should be able to give you some recommendations.
It is in a plan box. It's not. I'll get in there.
At least it shouldn't be, there is a list for invasive plants and you should avoid those at least.
Okay.
I had a question about some of these conditions that you put on here, Trevor. I guess condition 3 sort of suggesting additional construction activities. I mean, is the project not complete?
I didn't know
Okay.
actually if it was full, if it was, is it fully complete? Okay, so then that would not.
So we're going to strike 3 or leave it in, or what? What do we do?
I mean, I think you can strike it if the project's done.
Well, the fact that there is still some vegetation that you just referenced, and vegetation is item C, maybe we leave it in
And the building inspector would have to still go inspect it, so.
yeah, okay. I just want to make sure that, fine. Okay.
But to make sure.
We're not including the plants as a condition and then, we haven't included the plants as a condition at this point, so.
I mean, I think condition number 5 sort of fell into the same bucket, but I think we would leave it for the same purpose, for the same reason for leaving number 3.
Thank you, Trevor, for condition 6. I know it's in the process, but I know it was mentioned this came before us, the original permit. You mentioned it was in the staff report, but it was missed, it didn't get transferred, so that's happening now.
Yeah.
It did not make it as a condition to the last one.
Does your collective opinion, does condition 5 also prohibit the reestablishment of that trail that was weed waxed down the property?
So there is an open space easement for that area. I'm not sure the exact wording of that open space easement. Some level of vegetation maintenance is generally allowed. The Coastal Act requires a permit for major vegetation removal, as we've talked about fairly recently. There's not a clear definition for what constitutes major vegetation removal. Certainly the closer you get to the bluff and the beach and the coast, more Coastal Act requirements kick in. But it was really just weed whacked, so you don't worry about it too much for this. It should be protected by the open spaces.
Anything else from the commission? Okay, motion.
Based on application materials, information and findings included in the staff report and based on public testimony, I find that the project complies with the traditional LCP and other applicable policies and regulations, and move to adopt the information and require design review, protection, and other findings. Project has
Second.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No? All right, 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, moving on then, item number 4.
Get out of here.
Why would you do that, Trevor? Why would you say something that is so hard as that?
We have a lot to talk about.
Oh, my goodness. Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you very much. You too.
So policies on detached living spaces. We ready to move on?
Before I forget, I would like to add issue of after the fact that planning permits, building permits to a future agenda item. I think I think it's Sabatini is absolutely correct. It's many cases easier to beg for forgiveness after the fact when you're talking about a million parcel of land, a couple $1,000 is not going to kill it. And if you have to wait, as he said, 2 or 3 years, which I think is not correct, but if you have to wait anything and you've got your contractor right there and you can do it, why not? And so we've got to figure out a way to prevent that from happening.
When you cut down a tree.
Same thing with the tree, yeah. But this property has been problematic, and this is not the first time that this has happened. So one could argue, in the case I suggest that why not? Let's do it. I don't know these people, so I can't say, but I mean, certainly it is reflected here. So I'm just saying, I would like to see it as a future agenda item.
Yes.
For sure.
So another policy that the Planning Commission has adopted is for detached living spaces. And so that came up at the July meeting, and Planning Commission approved a detached policies for detached living spaces, as well as a definition of for a kitchen and a wet bar, which are related because a detached living space can't have a kitchen and a bath. So what the Planning Commission but there were some current concerns at the July meeting about the walkthroughs by the building inspector and how often that could occur and under what conditions that would occur. Could it be used as harassment, that sort of thing. So the Planning Commission expressed a desire to revisit that. So that's what I'm bringing back to you. And I have provided both the policy on detached living spaces, which is basically ends up as a standard list of conditions that would be added for all projects where that applies. And I also included the definition of kitchen visit.
All right. Any questions about the staff report before we start talking about this? So this was, as I recall, primarily condition number 4 about the periodic inspection and walkthrough by the city building inspector. The 24-hour notice. It came up during the approval for the Davies project. It's kind of a general, like Trevor said, concern that what is that standard? And it reads fairly arbitrary. I don't know that we've ever had an issue in town with it being used. And for me, the concern, I don't have concern necessarily about the city per se using it as a forum to harass somebody. I would be more concerned potentially about a neighbor, the other direction almost. And so I don't know what the right approach is. I did a little bit of research, just kind of looking around at different things. There's not a whole lot about it from that side. It's really, they seem very much complaint driven. Every municipality that I looked at just online and a very brief survey. And kind of like the complaint is generated and then the inspector goes out and then it goes from there. So maybe some kind of rubric or flow chart to determine what would rise to the standard of necessitating it, or could it be triggered by increasing water usage for the property based off historical precedent, or septic permits needing pumping more? I don't know. There's a couple things that popped into my head, triggers that we could see. But there also, I think, needs to be some mechanism to react more expeditiously should a legitimate concern be. So I don't,
Yeah, you wouldn't want to necessarily set up a possibility for, well, the neighbor complains, the inspector goes in, then he's not allowed back for a year. So then they're like, sweet. Not that.
and I didn't know if maybe one path forward might be to have more of a appeal or objection process for the person, like, hey, hang on, as a stop, a way for let's say someone calls about my property, for me to say, hang on, before this inspection happens, I want to come and talk about what's going on. I'm not saying no. I don't know if that would kind of get to the same thing from a different direction, but those are just my thoughts. Sorry. Okay.
Yeah, the bedroom has requirements by code. And by saying how many bedrooms are in that, on that piece of property, I mean, specifies that's a 3-bedroom piece of property. You're going to something else in, then it becomes something different. Something like I thought when somewhere in here where it said it's just the number of bedrooms, it says, to me, it says volumes right there.
I mean, bedrooms are certainly a part of it. In this case, it wasn't a bedroom. Often a detached living space is used as a bedroom. Then the more important factor is that the kitchen not. So that's usually the more common situation. But I think with bedrooms is kind of tough because there are some minimum requirements for a bedroom. But once you hit those minimum requirements, anything can be a bedroom. So, like, for example, we talked about with the Vanderpool project, that crow's nest. If they were going to use it as a bedroom, they could call it a bedroom. It would meet the requirements of a bedroom, but it's not necessarily a bedroom. Now, I have seen some cities who say, if it could be a bedroom, it's counted as a bedroom. But, I think with people's, and we do have, I think it's not a bad consideration in Trinidad because, we have a lot of, I've seen 2,500 square foot, two bedroom houses that have an office and a den and a this and a that. And it's not unlikely that someone in the future is going to come in and use those as bedrooms. But the septic system was only sized for 2 bedrooms. So I can see that. I mean, I think it's not, it's not a terrible consideration or, something to think about doing. But on the other hand, it would, the septic system requirements are pretty, there's a lot of space required there, and then you have to have a reserve area. So it would really limit, people's ability to have a den or a family room. So now it's not a real easy, it's not a real easy issue. And like we were talking a little bit with the ADU ordinance, I had the condition that you couldn't convert it back to your primary living space because I didn't want the loophole of getting through design review just to add on. But how do we regulate how someone uses the space? In terms of this, maybe it's something like if there has been a previous an inspection in the previous year, then there's certain requirements on a complaint, like maybe put some more onus on the neighbor or the complainant to provide some evidence.
So, we spent so much time on this, if you recall. But I think when you look at, and I'm focused on standard condition 4, owner to agree to periodic inspection. First of all, periodic says, there is a finite span of time between each inspection. I don't think that's necessary. Almost all of what I remember of these kinds of inspections have been as a result of a complaint.
Yes, the city wouldn't just go.
Right,
do
right.
inspections.
So with that in mind, it would seem to me that if we could say something to the effect that an inspection may not need to occur more than once annually, or if a complaint is received by the city. And I kind of like your idea of maybe what we do is we get the planning commission hear the complaint, and it would give both the complainant and the owner an opportunity to discuss what it is that is the complaint, and can it be resolved as part of a normal planning commission process?
I would suggest that it either be the city manager or.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to be. Yeah, you're right.
Then you have costs, and who's going to bear the costs?
That's very good.
So I would suggest it either be, before the building inspector, the city manager, or zoning administrator. Would be the three.
Yeah, because the experiences that we've had in here in Trinidad have been primarily a neighbor thinks something's going on, and they're washing clothes in the back, and there's not supposed to be a washer and dryer there, or there's a stove in there. So I don't know. It seems to me like getting two parties together. Well, that's why we put in there no 240 volt power. So I like the idea of getting the two parties together to discuss that, and then if necessary, if there has to be an inspection, that can be determined at that point.
Just a question: do we need to allow an opportunity for an anonymous complaint to be heard? There's an argument. I can make an argument in favor and against that concept. I think there's honestly a place for both, particularly in a small town with neighbors, and I put an anonymous complaint against you, but then it still gets heard. I don't necessarily have you can still come and meet with Trevor and the building inspector.
Yeah, it could be separate meetings.
I don't know.
That's a valid point, and maybe Trevor's right. If it's necessary, there could be two meetings, or whoever is assigned to resolve the complaint, maybe then could determine how they want to handle an anonymous complaint. I don't think we've ever had an anonymous complaint, but maybe we have.
I think technically they're generally supposed to be anonymous. It doesn't need to be.
So how does it work currently? Say someone doesn't have any sort of permitted detached living space, but they have some kind of a unit back there, something sitting there, and the neighbor complains. What action can the city take? I mean, can we send the inspector in there?
Yes. Then there's a process. So, and there are different processes, I think, depending on the nature of the violation. Something that is a health and safety issue, I think there's different steps in terms of just a standard violation. Normally, the building inspector would ask for access as the first step. We had the church on West Haven. That one's been an issue where we've dealt with this a little bit. It's not necessarily that the building official was refused entry, but just getting response. And so there are steps that can be taken. And if refused, you can eventually get a order if you have to. So there are steps necessarily cheap, but it's not necessarily easy, and enforcement is difficult and expensive and time consuming. If you don't, hopefully you get compliance right away. You just write a letter and say, hey, so there's a courtesy letter goes out first, and then a notice in order to abate. That's usually once we know there's a violation. Yeah, normally it's amicable, but it gets difficult if someone's not.
So the idea here would be to streamline that process.
Yeah, so that basically they're agreeing ahead of time. So that they really, they still could refuse, I suppose, but it would be easier probably for the city to get a court order or whatever is needed if they've got this condition on. I think probably most people, if they knew they had agreed to that, would have a harder time.
Yeah. Other like the next owner might yeah.
I think too that there's some, at least in my mind, there's some merit to changing the 24 hours to 24-hour notice to something a little bit more flexible to 48 or so. I mean, the point there being is that how often can we do something within the 24-hour period? People's lives get busy and they may not even be in town. Certainly someone who is using this as a second home or whatever may need more time to address this. So I just thought the 24-hour notice was maybe a little too.
Where's their mom and dad at? Are you lying?
I feel like the 24-hour notice is like almost kind of like intimidating to the owner. Like, it's like,
catch
the city could be here tomorrow,
That's what I mean.
Yeah,
I don't think we have to do that. But.
You were part when this was written, Richard. Was that more kind of to keep me from being able to pull the curtains over the situation and hide it from discovery? Is that where that originated? Do you remember? Or that's the only I can think of why there would be such a tight. I don't know.
Yeah,
take down the walls.
There was a great deal of emotion regarding the way this was developed, and Trevor helped me out if I'm stepping into too much. But at the time, we were dealing with multiple complaints and on multiple properties, and we just said, hey, enough is enough. We really need to clamp down on this. And certainly, get your attention if you have a 24-hour period. But I just don't know that it has to be quite that stringent, as I said earlier. A lot of it had to do with the fact that if we gave them any longer a period of time, that we were afraid that they would try to move things around.
Right. Yeah.
And then as soon as the inspector comes in, looks okay, and then immediately things revert back to where they were before. So that was, I think, primarily, again, Trevor, help me if I'm not saying this correctly, but primarily that was the reason, because it was happening. So
this timing wise, about the same time as the STR ordinance.
Yes.
Kind of around that same, a little bit after, but
it was actually a little bit before.
Okay.
But they got intertwined too.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, the primary one that went on for long.
You changed the definitions a little bit in the kitchen, or is that just?
Well, we don't have, our zoning ordinance doesn't have a definition of the kitchen.
Because this looks good.
Yeah, I just included it for context, because we discussed them and adopted them at the same time.
And I listened to the previous meetings. And I mean, I understand what he was trying to do and everything, but with ADUs, I mean, following the rules, it's pretty easy. He could have had something then that somebody else could use in the future as such, and it would be clearer, basically, if we just said, just follow the rules of an ADU, instead of a grade.
Well, except then he would have had to upgrade his septic system.
It's a big.
Yeah.
If someone just wants a bonus room.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. I'm glad I missed that.
That was my solicitation. So, I mean, another one of our concerns from that evening was just the unenforceability of so much of these things. And I'm not sure that periodic inspections with 24 hours notice is the answer, but I think that there ought to be some mechanism by which, it can be ensured that a permitted project is being used as prescribed. I don't know that it needs to be or should be driven exclusively by complaints from neighbors. Thinking about that specific project, if the bathroom ended up being 5 by 7 instead of 5 by 5, and it was plumbed for a shower and a bathtub, that would necessarily ruffle the neighbor's feathers, and yet it would go against the stated purpose of that project. So, I guess the challenge, not that anybody needs to hear this, is that we want to maintain enforceability.
And it's not, it's not the shower, it's if it was rented separately. So it's really the use and the intent of not allowing the shower is to prevent the use. And that's where, what you're getting at is, so then we just require the septic upgrades, and then if they convert it, so what? But that's not really necessarily the good answer either. Because then there's other issues with ADUs too, parking. It could be, you could do something more performance based in terms of water use.
That occurred to me, water use, or you have to pump the septic more frequently, but then that's so arbitrary.
Yeah.
Water use, if you're conserving a lot of something changes in your household, you have a child, somebody else moves into your existing bedroom, it's striking the balances between this enforceability component, which is absolutely necessary, right? But also the assumption that people are going to do right by what they're doing, and that's, I'd say the benefit of a complaint-driven system is if it's a legitimate concern, maybe concern is a better word than complaint, then we're assuming the best of people and only intervening or having questions when there's concern that there's something not being done in accordance with what was approved. And that, feels better than, I know where I work, you can't sell your home without having a pre-sale inspection by the city, and they find all sorts of unpermitted stuff. And it's a huge roadblock, and I'm not advocating that here. It's just that, that's one extreme. Briefly popped in my head as a thought. I'm like, no, I don't think that's necessary. But
you could take that approach, but limit it to detached living spaces. If you wanted to go down that road, in other words, as long as you don't have any other living space other than your single family dwelling, no inspection. But if you have a detached living space, then perhaps you would be subject to an inspection.
Good. At the property transfer, because that's a lot of times when, and it would be certainly a way to ensure that the new owner knows. I have a new one on Ocean that they submitted their OWTS permit, and it's like, oh, we got 3 bedrooms and 2 units. And there you go. They just got it.
Because that's something we've talked about, a struggle for. How does the next owner know what the...
It is required to be disclosed legally. So who knows what happened.
Okay. Anything else at the commission? We want to open up public comment? briefly and then bring it back to us? That sounds fine. All right, we'll open up the public comment now. See that Jerry has joined us. Item 4. If there's any public comment out there. Pause here. Oh, there we go.
No, good evening. I just wanted to check in. I know it's hard decision making, but it is important to figure out how to get this right, because it sounds like there's opportunity for people to, housing is such a hard thing, and we balance housing needs with, the decisions we make in planning. But nope, I'm just listening in tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. So what I've heard is kind of float as maybe some direction for Trevor is the idea maybe of a hearing of some sorts if there is a complaint, some kind of that concept. And I think the city manager, if necessary, I think the zoning administrator and the building inspector, I think are two really critical people to be party to that person. We're just kind of talking, Trevor's talked about so far, the concept of a hearing, maybe. The consensus on that, if we can. There's some direction for Trevor.
Yeah, I mean, I guess a meeting with the managers is reasonable. I think. I mean, I like personally, I like the complaint or concern driven system. I mean, because on the one hand, it's like if somebody is using their space inappropriately, but like literally either no one notices, then there's really not too much cause for concern, in my opinion. I guess I know that it's like against the permitted to the space, but but I think that like the neighbor files a complaint, we take those seriously, and that seems to. I mean, while it may be frustrating at times, it seems to have worked, at least in the history of people making complaints about illegal ADUs and things. I mean, I guess I'm not a fan of greater policing by the city or something like that. I just said that. I guess I like the idea of the homeowner sort of being able to work with what they got and not feeling like cities getting the pounds or something like that. And I know it gets tricky, but ownership change. But I should the previous ones. So,
I guess.
So
if now someone could have a tenant quietly living, I mean, in one sense, yeah, well, performance-based makes sense because what we're worried is what's coming out in terms of traffic. But then, like Tom was saying, they might do a commercial kitchen, like a home kitchen. The water use would go up. But their water use should still stay within the design of the septic system.
Or plant a big garden and start it.
True. I'm just thinking, so the one thing I think the city should kind of keep an eye on, and is keeping an eye on a little bit with the OWTS permits, is lights. And so if someone's water use all of a sudden went up, in winter, was above the design flow of the septic system in winter, I think that'd be cause for concern, even if it wasn't a complaint from a neighbor. But that's probably the one situation I would be.
So to clarify, what you're suggesting there is the ability without a complaint for the city to.
I mean, that's really the only evidence I think the city would ever be aware of without a neighbor.
I guess technically the city could be the complainant then.
That's true. I guess the city could be.
Yeah, I mean, if one of the
Or
public
city
works,
staff could walk by and see a moving truck.
but you know, if public works walked by a property and saw that there was illegal power line or something like that, I mean, that would trigger then, I think, the city to, you know, file a complaint, if you will.
Yeah. I think it would take quite a bit for the city to do that.
Specific to condition 4, we talked about the 24 hours. Where are we on that? Consider changing that. And we like the ability to catch somebody, I guess, if with a concern, or if you remove that 24 hours and make it longer, then there is the ability to move the plants around and put up curtains and, you know, which would be very frustrating to somebody that had raised a concern or a complaint. Doesn't mean it has to happen in 24 hours. It just means that, you know, keep in mind, we have a building inspector that's here 1 day a week.
Right.
So unless we tell them on Wednesday, they're going to get some decent notice anyway.
I'm fine with leaving it that way, unless we, you know, have some real need to change it, but yeah.
Okay.
There could be health and safety implications, right? Where sooner is back better.
Yeah.
Part of living in the city.
Right.
Well, that's safety. Okay, so just make sure it's clear in my mind. If there is a health and safety, all bets are off in terms of they can go in right away. The only thing I think that 24 hours references is the periodic inspection. Right? I mean, if
I think you might be right. If there's like no heat, no hot water, the basics.
And if there's a septic issue, I think they could go in right away, right? There's no time limit.
Yeah, no, I don't think you'd have to give 24-hour notice. I mean, I think you'd still have to knock on the door and ask for access.
Are you able to reach out to our new inspector to see if he knows those things? And if not, we all come there together.
That's a good question.
Because he's missing from this conversation too. I realize where that position is.
Yeah.
And then I didn't know if 4 would feel any better if there were language added, you know, not to exceed an amount per calendar year without approval of some entity.
Yeah, that might be a good way to word it.
Be it 1, be it, I don't know what would be reasonable that way. Have we ever had the nuisance complaint issue in the town that those of you that have been around longer know of, where they all been kind of rounded and founded complaints? For the most part. Taking out issues of perception, which is probably wrong, right?
I would say when it came down to the second units and STRs, there were some, I call them malicious complaints, but yeah.
I don't know. So just a thought to put a not to exceed without approval.
Yeah. I mean, not to exceed twice a year.
Seems, I mean, reasonable to me.
Yeah, I said annually, whatever. Yeah,
It's a year.
I mean.
What about annually without not to exceed an annual inspection, or once per calendar year, right? Without approval of that body we're talking about forming, with, you know, you and the city manager. That kind of, some vetting of this concern.
I don't know if approval is the word, or without a recommendation from.
Yeah.
Without a recommendation from.
Yeah, I mean, if you say you wanted to do it once a year, that's going to tie up the building inspector for a good number of hours.
Well, I'm not proposing mandated inspections annually. I'm saying I can't call and say, look at Richard's house more than once a year.
Oh,
without
I see.
There
Okay.
being some kind of like,
Okay.
is there something different?
Got it. Okay. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, no, I'm not creating work for the building inspector. Maybe some language, Trevor, that, unless it's for a different issue or something, if it's a different issue, then if it's the same issue again, we really need to have a conversation before we're going to go knock on someone's door and maybe a recommendation.
Well, but it really be tied to the detached.
Right.
This would tie it to the detached living space. So, I mean, but because you wouldn't want somebody to say, okay, well, they've got a stove in there, and then the next time they just say, oh, well, now they have a tenant in it there. So I would consider that the same issue as a maybe.
Because currently the only mandated inspections I know of are the STR annual licensing inspection. There's none for business licenses, for rental properties, commercial, none of those things, right? Okay.
Yeah, I think that's good. Annually with on recommendation of said.
I guess who should that be?
I suggested you, the building inspector, and the city manager.
All three?
I think it's important because I think you all three would have a different piece of information perspective to bring to something like this. This is my opinion.
I think that's reasonable unless you think that's like overkill. You're in Trevor. Or that's
Then
just
I might
too much
say
work.
agreement from. Yeah, all three, it's fine. Yeah, it's all different perspective. And the manager is kind of the all end all and gets the planning.
Well, clearly the city manager needs to know what's going on.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
We can take pictures, or at least the city representative. At least check the ball rolling.
Okay, so no more than once per calendar year without agreement from building inspector, zoning administrator, and city manager. Now, calendar year, so what if someone made a complaint on, so that's in December 31st, January 1st, or, so it could be less than a year, but it could also be 2 years.
It does seem like a
So
rolling 12.
not more than
I feel like it's just easier to keep
twice
track.
in 12 months, maybe just twice in 12 months. No, then
Like the word reasonable. Reasonable.
everybody.
I know, but if it's not reasonable, then you can be the judge. You can say that's not reasonable or that is reasonable. Yeah, let's go do it.
A rolling 12, would that work?
That's right, once in 12 months.
I mean, this issue has come up tonight already about deterring this type of behavior, right? And I just want to make sure that's, I mean, it seems to me like having 4 year, and maybe Richard, you could speak to this because we're about this draft. It really is, it serves as a deterrent, right? I mean, yes, it can serve as a mechanism for policing, but really it also exists as a deterrent. I just want to make sure that if it's getting replaced, that that language is just as much of or more of a deterrent, sort of independent of the actual capacity for policing these things. Can you ensure that there's at least the perception of a negative consequence? I don't know.
So, I mean, I think, because we're talking about, okay, it's still with 24-hour notice. So owner to agree to periodic inspections walked through by the city building inspector with 24-hour notice, but no more than once in any 12-month period without agreement from building inspector, zoning administrator, city manager. So it'd be next week if all three agree that something's going on.
Yeah, I think when that came up with Davies, mean, I brought it up. I found that condition to be like a little bit intimidating, which maybe that's the point, but I don't, I guess it's intimidating enough to keep you from using your space inappropriately, but I guess I didn't really like being too coming across as
Yeah, well, and I think it also, the way it's worded, it sounds like, oh, so they're just gonna automatically come periodically. But that's not the intent. The intent is if there's you want to add that, yes, but again, the city's not going to spend the time. So I don't think there's much danger in that, but maybe it's not so clear.
And I feel like we're keeping the teeth, so to speak, the deterrent value, but we're kind of defining reasonable a little bit here. We're kind of putting a little bit of bumper rails on them because it was pretty vague there. I think it was the concern that got attention to that. All right, enough to move. For you, Trevor, you got enough guidance? And
I think so. Would you like to see it again next month for final action?
If you want to explore, I mean, there was some nodding when it was mentioned, sections of transfer of the property that contains some detached living space. Yes.
It's a great idea. I just don't think that it can be done here. I think we probably have to do some more. I don't even know how to do that. I don't know if that would become a policy or if that would be.
So are you thinking about it broader than just detached living spaces?
Well, we started off looking at just detached living. Well, I guess we didn't, because you were saying that in some cities, they just do a walkthrough inspection prior to any sale. And then we kind of narrowed it down to just detached living spaces, but I don't know if that's really, I don't know how to do that.
I guess if it's just for detached living spaces, then you would make it a condition of approval. And if they accept that, then you could do it that way. So you could do that as part of this process for approving detached living spaces.
Okay.
If you want to do it more broadly, then we'd probably need it in an ordinance.
This is making another job for somebody else. And
Yeah.
if it's a rule on the website, on the new website, maybe this is the way it is, and refer to our rules. This is the Trinidad rule.
And we are going to be updating the zoning ordinance. So we can kind of
because
larger issue.
I'd say the larger issue, I feel like we invest a lot of time and comments on our lack of opportunity to educate, enforce whatever mechanism. And this could be a way to do that, but I think it would solve more issues, in particular, more global perspective. So that maybe when we get to the zoning ordinance, might be time to at least consider it.
Yeah, and I think, there's some education and outreach to realtors. Certainly most properties in Trinidad go through just a few realtors' hands, but there are some other random ones that come up that might not, they might not know about the OW, because we already have that as a requirement that they have to disclose the WTS requirements. That's in the ordinance. When we first started that program, we did send information to the realtors. We haven't done that in a while. But yeah, I mean, like you said, it's kind of a deterrent. It's education. I think, a lot of people don't know that some of these things are required. Especially if you're not doing construction, if you're just moving stuff around and using it wasn't.
Yeah, I mean, going down that road would generate a lot of work for the city. Also, like they'd have to manage all these, watch out for properties that are for sale, and properties are only listed on the market for whatever, a couple of days, and then they disappear. And I guess the other concern there, well, maybe it's not, I guess just from a cost standpoint, it's like, okay, you do this inspection on someone's house and then it like turns out they got an illegal ADU or fourth bedroom or whatever. And then it just like opens this can of worms that I guess sort of it gets saddled onto for the homeowner, like the cost of dealing with all that. But like there's a huge amount of work that would have just like come out of nowhere. It's somewhat unexpected for the city.
Yeah, I'll just step in for a second. I'm just looking at the agenda. I think we're drifting pretty far from our topic. So I'd suggest that we can come back to this for some discussion, even just put it on as a discussion item if we want to. But I think for tonight, we're drifting kind of far from detached living spaces now, and I'm definitely guilty of that as well.
Thanks.
Good point. I'll just end it to say that we do that to some degree, and we always have with the other tips. So we don't catch them all, but and we have had to deal with some issues that came up, and just the OWTS permit itself kind of discloses some of that information. We do have that a little bit embedded.
All right, then moving on to agenda item 5.
So this was the item that I gave you the wrong regulations. I think what happened is normally I have my files in order of last modified, and it came up as alphabetical orders. Doesn't. But anyway, so this is now the current regulations. I think to some degree they are what they are, because for the most part they just follow the Coastal Commission regulations. So we don't have a whole lot of flexibility in how these are administered, and what these regulations look like. We could consider separately. So I think one of the things is currently our CDP process is always associated with, we don't actually have a separate CDP process, which is doesn't work for everything. But I sort of hoped that we could continue to streamline those permits and have, the same process for design review and CDP and the same sets of findings. And so I wanted to have, the exemptions and exclusions and the administrative processes also work for design review. So that's where we started from. And, after talking with the Coastal Commission, that's not going to work for CDPs. We have to follow their process. So we could, when we update the LCP, we could have another administrative approval process for design reviews or other things. This would cover some things. But anyway, so, I think there's a little bit of leeway we have to change things around, but, like the list of projects that are subject to administrative permits, that's apparently pretty set in stone. According to the Coastal Commission, they didn't even want it to be stricter. Normally you can be stricter. Anyway, so this is, like I said, it is what it is. I do have a flow chart in there that sort of shows what the process is. And I think this is the map I've been interested in. So this shows where administrative permits would apply, which is the local jurisdiction. So the pinkish area. And then just on the side, we've also been talking about ADUs and the ministerial permits, which is, there's no review, no hearing. It's just if you check the boxes, you get your permit. And that's what the state requires. So that's the hatched area. we'll be talking about ADUs again. So, and I think, these administrative, permit regulations are necessary for the ADU ordinance. I just sent, another version of that to the Coastal Commission. We've got most things worked out. They're gonna send a copy to HCD, so HCD does have to approve the ordinance as well. So we'll probably get some comments back from them. But the next time you see the ADU ordinance, I will incorporate these into that. Take comments, questions.
Had one question at the very end. Paragraph K on page 4 of the procedures, which is expiration. The last sentence says, if expired, another coastal development permit application shall be required. I guess for clarification, could you say whether or not that would be an administrative CDP or a formal CDP?
It could be an administrative CDP again.
So you just start the process over again.
Yeah.
There's no penalty per se.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I will note there are a few things like that. The findings, for example, that's a big one. Some of the noticing. These are things that when we do our big update, they're not going to be specific to administrative permits, but they should already be requirements for CDPs, standard CDPs, but because we don't have a process for just CDPs, we don't have these findings, we don't have these, we don't have our notification requirements aren't currently in compliance. We don't have anything about expiration. So some of these are going to get wrapped into the normal CDP process for now because we don't.
In paragraph K, just a question, why 3 years for this particular type of CDP versus 2, which I feel like we see more often, a 2-year? I don't know if there's an advantage to keeping things consistent or.
I'm not sure. That language I think is probably flexible. I don't think that specific language is in the Coastal Act regulations. It's probably from whatever ordinance I took this from. So yeah, I think 2 years is probably more standard for us. And actually we often do a year. And for bigger projects, 2 years. So an administrative permit should be a small project. Just a year.
And a question, I feel like it's clear in the flow chart, which I love, by the way. I think the more we can do those, the easier it is for everybody to understand. But as far as the process, right? So you would issue an administrative CDP, right? Technically, it's a tentative until it comes before us as either a consent item or we pull it out, and then the 10-day appeal period.
That's correct. And
so
yes,
with that, I think there might be an opportunity in section G on page 3 somewhere to maybe clarify that in the verbiage for someone reading through it, that it doesn't, I don't know, maybe it's just me. It doesn't feel like it's clear enough in the text of this that it's a tentative permit until at least it comes before us. There's still that one more check. And that's important to me just so that members of the community don't feel that there's no oversight on this. I want to make sure it's very clear that yes, there's an opportunity that will be agendized. It will come before us as a consent item and then we can, where the right place to put that clarification is. Thank you for teaching me de minimis. Lacking significance, or I mean, I got it from the context. I'm like, what does that actually do?
It actually comes up in a number of legal.
I bet. Anything else? Anybody have questions or comments or concerns about before we open it to public comment?
I think maybe I can add the language to clarify, maybe.
Okay. Yeah, it's kind of like they're all conditionally approved, right?
Yeah.
Pause here. We'll open this one to public comment. If there's anybody online to land, now's your chance. Not seeing anybody running to click unmute or raise their hand, so we'll bring it back to us. Would you please speak up? All right, back to the commission.
So just so it's clear in my mind, Trevor, right now these procedures, not policy, procedures are 17.72.076, which would that's going to go into the ordinance.
Yes, so chapter 72 is has all the CDP use permit variants. So it has all the hearing notice requirements, appeals, things like that.
And then the numbers in parentheses, remind me again what they are.
Oh. So those, that's the certified zoning ordinance. So I think I've mentioned this.
Yeah, okay, I just want to clarify that that's what that is. Okay.
So the 1772 is the codified zoning ordinance, and the 7.12 is the certified zoning. So we're working on reconciling those two. Way more complicated than I thought it was going to be, and so those will work. But that's what we, for our SDR ordinance, and we've been doing that for a while. I was just getting.
I just want to clarify where this winds up. Okay. Thank you.
Anything else from anybody? I did want to come back to the minutes. We now have the proper quorum to the three people that were present at that August meeting. Am I remembering right? Exactly here. So Slay and myself were the three present at the August 16th meeting. Changes to those minutes.
Admit, very small, page 707 of the minutes at the top of the page. And the sentence started having a status report, I believe it, just to clarify, requested a status report on the general plan. I think that's what you meant to say.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think it's inaccurate as written, but I do want to explicitly again that if parking is plentiful, which it appears to be, that's really emphasize we're okay with the trade-off between parking and public safety, right? That's improving walkability and improving the where I don't know.
Okay.
And there's somewhere, as we discussed, the parking. Right. This is something I mentioned. I feel like it should be explicitly somewhere that if parking is indeed plentiful and necessary, we can use that resource to ensure public safety. Exactly where in the course of the meeting that came up, or do you recall?
Is that on page 3 of 7 towards the bottom? I made a comment to the effect that there's putting some note in there that there are areas of concentrated use of parking. Is that kind of what you're getting at, to help manage the perception that overall the survey says there's not a, is that what you're?
I mean, that was one of the major findings, right? I mean, maybe it was more,
Was it in the red curve discussion?
was part of,
Because then you were talking about maybe we need to add red curve in some places.
yeah, I guess I should have reviewed, the reporting of the meeting for it. It's con. Correct me if I'm wrong, one of the findings of the report was that there is this perception of there being a parking problem, but there's not in fact a parking problem.
Yes. I would say that.
And so if it's necessary to tap into parking availability, if projects with pedestrian safety or walkability in town, then I think that we'd be mindful of the fact that there is some parking.
And there are places to add parking.
So there's something you'd like to
Like
see
I
given
said,
in the
like I
minutes,
said, I
or
don't think it's inaccurate as written, but I do want to
in the
make sure
minutes?
that that idea is similar because I do recall seeing.
That's definitely a recorded record.
Now, I guess the question is, would you like me to add that to these minutes? Or if it's recorded in these minutes tonight, is that good enough?
Oh gosh. Yeah, I wasn't prepared for this sort of discussion. I think maybe I should prepare for better, but
Yeah, just to that
I
point,
mean,
I think it'd be more important that it'd be standalone in the actual minutes from the meeting than tonight's.
Okay.
and might actually remember we were talking about the prioritization of strategies, right? That there was a discussion of
Why don't I add it there on page 4?
at page 7.
Yeah, because they're not, well, wait, maybe that's not.
There are parking hotspots where there are concentrated efforts of, or locations where there aren't parking. Overall, there is not too far away parking available. Right. Kind of
Now with all the speed bumps going in, everybody's gonna be going into that parking area.
That's an editorial.
So yeah, the 1, 2, 3, the 4th paragraph down talks about prioritizing strategies, and maybe if I added it.
And I don't have the paper in front of me, but one of those priorities was something related to
Walkability. Yeah.
and alternative
Yeah.
transport and stuff like
Yeah.
that. But if necessary to support those strategies, you consider parking resource access.
let's do this again as a greatest hit next month, then, right?
Well, I mean, if you really want to see the language, or if you're okay with me just adding something that, Slade pointed out that if parking is plentiful, then there are parking spaces available for other strategies like walkability.
Okay, then a motion to approve the minutes with that change revision I put in.
Move to approve as amended.
And I will second that. It's a favor. Aye.
Aye.
All right, 3-0. All right, so the minutes are done. Get that. Moving to commissioner reports. The WAC, let's go down the line. The WAC is about to meet next week. We have our meeting 5. We'll also say that there is coming out draft of what Trevor sent us or showed us last meeting of the kind of water usage thing that is going to be coming. It's, the city's picking that up and going with that. Project manager, so that's
Oh yeah, the little
postcard that you gave us that
Yeah.
draft last time. So that's, we're going to see more of that.
Yeah, I guess the rest of the commission didn't see it, but I created little postcards, and you can actually just use an Excel file, insert the name, their water use. So you can sort of do a template, and then you can use mail merge to just insert that for every water account. So it's going to be a little.
Committee reports done.
Trail committee next month.
SDR committee is also.
It's not necessarily a meeting, but RCEA is doing a survey of all of the county for disaster resiliency, particularly focused on power issues. But it's kind of broad, it's branched out, and it's a little bit more than that. I bring it up is because I'm on the CAC board for RCEA. And one of the things that was really missing is that there was very little input from Trinidad, not because of anybody didn't do it, but people were just not familiar with what our resiliency capabilities were up here. So I've been trying to add to their survey some of the disaster related resiliency things like town hall with batteries, etc. And just remind people that the school, rancheria are areas where people can congregate as well as town hall. So they're working on that. Hopefully it'll be a little bit better than how we came out. But they still had us as a police department still.
And you have the local hazard mitigation plan?
Do I have it?
Yeah.
I mean, I
think some of that isn't talked about.
Yeah, there's so much overlap right now with what everybody's doing that it's almost hard to keep track of who's doing what to who. Yeah. And you get OES involved, and you get what's the other acronym? COAD, right? And then you get CERT and RCEA's in it, so it goes on and on. But yeah. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Not at all.
And then I did have one other thing, just to plug for the CERT committee, the Community Emergency Response Team that the city has decided to form for the greater Trinidad West Haven, and hopefully a little bit bigger. Really encourage people to look into it. I believe the meeting is on the 25th here in Town Hall, and then November there's training over the course of the weekend. It starts Friday and goes Saturday, Sunday. It's a great way for us to support ourselves. And one thing we learned this winter and with the earthquake, we are going to be on our own. And so it's a great other two.
We applied for my ham license so I could be a radio operator.
Thank you. All right, staff report, Trevor.
Let's see. I'm still wrapping up a couple of, the final reports and deliverables for SB2 and LEAP. And then thinking about what my next steps are. One will be the cultural resources element of the general plan. And I was reminded that Aaron asked for an update on where all the various elements are. And then I think the resiliency planning the coastal resiliency planning is far enough along that I can start on some of my tasks. We just revised the LCP grant timeline to put things back because we're already so behind on that. Picking up the safety element in June.
Does that go past 2025 now? The new timeline for that one?
It goes through 2025. And I'm still going to be continuing to process some of those SB2 and LEAP, so the zoning for the reasonable accommodation ordinance and the other ordinance that were passed. We just have to get this certification worked out to we'll have ready for council's October meeting. And we're still working on ADU ordinance in the background. Because I'm going to focus on LCP grant tasks and it's going to be revamping the application forms and creating frequently asked questions. Website permitting. You see, Aaron, you've got the website up. I will say there's a lot of great things about the new website, but I can't find it.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
and I think a lot of it is not tagged right, and not all of it has been brought in. So I think, and the city really wanted to get it live, and so it got live, and then it was like, okay, great, now we're done. And no, we have to keep working.
Hard work.
So if you guys, I think, keep notes when you go on the website and can't find things, because I'm gonna be, and I'm gonna be, Cheryl's kind of heading that, and so I'm gonna be bugging Cheryl to get some stuff. I have some coastal resiliency planning and stuff up there. The water reports aren't there. So that's a work in progress, and I think input will be done.
Okay, future agenda items. I know we had one added, going back to the after the fact permit. I think that definitely, and then I had a thought or a request, I guess. What if in parentheses after we put the month and the year that these things got added to it? Just to kind of remind us how long. I do. Because this is just a parking lot of things we might get to talk about at some point down the road.
Yeah.
And just personal, I recognize there's a tremendous balance of our time and, more importantly, staff's time with obligations that we have already and irons that we have in the fire. I want to make sure we're not missing opportunities to be proactive on things that have been brought to our attention and things we want to work on at the expense of these other commitments. So I don't know how to balance that, but it's not quite a frustration, but just a thought that we're so busy with what we've already got that we can't tackle it. We're never going to make progress if we don't figure out some way to chew a little bites away at this list as well. Otherwise, it's just going to continue to grow and become unwieldy.
Yeah.
Future agenda items.
Yeah. Well, I think, in a sense, I'm not sure rainwater catchment needs to come back to the planning commission necessarily. Unless you want to expand on sort of the idea of the proof plans, which GHD is working on with the demonstration project over the school. The TMP incorporation into the general plan I have done in the background. So some of that's in was in the cultural resources element. I ended up taking the section on the tri-state area out at the recommendation of the city attorney right now, because there's ongoing litigation. Anyway, I am working on that. Vegetation and signs are potential cans of worms, but we'll get to those definitely when we do our big update.
I'd like to add another can of worms.
Oh boy.
I think, at least from my mind, it would be very useful to at least have some sort of primer on annexation. That could be just as simple as maybe a briefing, but I'd really like to understand it in the context of every time we talk about we have to annex certain areas, but then I don't know enough about the process, the procedures, what's all required.
That's a great question, and it's actually the other REAP grant task is to do a preliminary. It's like a preliminary services. I forget what they call it, the LAFCO that you do to start the annexation process. It's like an assessment of your ability to provide services. And I'm going to be doing some outreach to Area A. So that's the link.
When is our joint meeting generally with us in the council and the STR committee? Coming up, right?
December.
Somewhere right at the end of the year. The only reason on that same thought, I can't remember what meeting it was in the last few months at the council. Steve Ladwig brought up the concept and said that that's something that needs to be thought about. So I don't know if the timing.
Okay.
To have at least a very high level presentation at that meeting. I don't know, just a thought.
Yeah.
That's not too far off, but
Annexation for dummies.
right. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's always been a lot of resistance from outside the city to annexation, but I have no idea what sentiment is now.
Well, and that's the other reason I think it would be useful maybe to have some sort of dialogue and then we get a feel for how much resistance there is.
Thanks.
Glad to.
Anything else for future agenda items? That we are adjourned. Thanks.
Thank you.
Feel free, Trevor.
But I didn't jinx it.
No, you did.